Okay. And some of the questions that I'll ask, don't laugh at me, because you'll probably be thinking, well, Susan knows that. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to Gary Gray about some fisheries issues, and he kept saying, well, you know that, your husband's a fisherman. And I kept saying, yeah, but for the story, I need to make sure I have my facts right. So, we'll start off with your name, Darrin McBride, and it's Darrin.
Right.
Okay. What's your birth date?
December 11th, 1986.
And that makes you how old?
26.
Thank you. And have you always lived in Frisco?
Except for when I went to college, yes. I lived in Buxton for a very short time as well, but I've always lived in the general area.
And college?
Was in Wilmington.
Okay.
And I did a semester abroad in Newcastle, Australia.
What did you do there?
Served and studied.
What did you study?
International relations, marketing, and history. They wanted us to take advantage of the different curriculum that was offered over there. So it actually put me behind as far as graduating on time. It took me 4.5 years to graduate rather than 4 because of that. But because I waited to go kind of late, and I had already done all my basic studies and electives, so I waited a while to declare my major. So it took me, because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I still don't know what I wanted to do. That's why I'm fishing. So I had to take all elective courses, and I was to a point in the curriculum where I needed to start focusing on my major. So I was only allowed to take one course that applied directly to my major, and then I had to take electives. So I took an Australian history class. I took a U.S. history class because I wanted to see what their perspective was. I took.
Bet you that was interesting.
Yeah, it was. And I took a marketing class and international relations class.
Did you see any fishermen over there?
No.
Where you were? No.
No. Well, I mean, at that point, I wasn't really very interested in fishing. I had no idea that I was going to fish when I got out of school at that point. So I never really thought about it. And they did have a harbor, and I probably would have been more likely to look into it now. But the harbor, a large part of it was coal mining. They have coal mines just inland of there.
Oh, really?
And they use the harbor where I was in Newcastle to export the coal and to ship it around the country. And they use it as a power source. And that was the main goings. I mean, that was the real obvious goings that were going in, because there was a lot of large ships. They used to actually sit out. You could see them when you were surfing, sitting out off in the distance, waiting to get ferried into the harbor. Because it was that busy of a port. There was, every day.
Was it a city?
Yeah. Just 2 hours north of Sydney, right on the coast. Just a blue collar coal town.
That must have been a great experience.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. I just wanted to do something different, and I'd always wanted to go over there. So I entered an exchange program, or applied for one and got accepted. So that was really nice, and so I was able to just pay my Wilmington tuition and buy a plane ticket and a visa and go.
And you were set.
Because all the other kids that I met over there that were from the U.S., they were in abroad programs where you actually had to pay a large fee and you could go into any school you wanted. But I was more limited because I had to pick a school that had an exchange program with UNCW.
Okay.
And it was Newcastle and 3 or 4 other schools.
Okay.
And I just ended up choosing there because I had a friend, Jason Andre, that had gone there a few years prior to that, and he had good things to say about it. So I just, a little bit of familiarity things with that, and just knew a couple people from Wilmington that were going there, and seemed like it was the best choice.
So when did you graduate from Wilmington?
December 2008.
And degree?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration. My concentration is in Operations Management.
What does that mean?
It is basically, I chose that because I felt like it best set you up to run your own business. They actually have an entrepreneurial program, but operations management more teaches you inventory control, logistics, distribution, production capacity, and things like that, as well as focusing on services and how they apply. So it was really, it was pretty broad, and it just kind of fit in well with what I was already familiar with, because I grew up working in restaurants as well as fishing. So because it was service oriented, and being from Hatteras, and every business down here is pretty much offering a service, that kind of just made sense, and it just really clicked in my brain. Like, I took the intro class in the in business. You have to take X amount of courses in all the different disciplines,
right.
Finance, marketing, accounting, and you had to take one in operations, and I took it and I loved it, so I just kept doing it.
Well, yeah, and you're right. It does sound like the type of thing that would be really relevant to Hatteras and businesses.
Yeah, and it just teaches you how to run your own business, because I didn't think it was smart to limit yourself just to finance or marketing, being that I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do. So operations just made sense because it was services oriented, and it was broad in that it gave me a logistics background, supply chain background, services background, just a little bit of everything, quality control, just everything that a business really needs to consider when working in order to be successful. And I felt like that kind of taught me what was important in business to make things work, and what wasn't, and what costs that you needed to undertake as a business to make things work, and which things maybe weren't necessarily as important, and just kind of gave you a clear view on where you needed to spend money, where not to, what you needed to focus your interest in, what not
exactly.
to. So it really applies to fishing in a weird way, because you're running a business in fishing, and you really need to figure out what to focus on, what not to, where to spend money, where not to, how to make cost-effective decisions so you don't get backwards.
Let me ask you a question. Do fishermen do that?
Sometimes. The good ones do.
And do you think that's a newer trend with fishermen, or do you think they've always had a business plan and have approached this from a business point of view?
Well, I think you have to approach it from a business point of view, because if you don't, you may lose your rear end in the end, because you're in the business to make money, regardless of how much you enjoy it or you don't enjoy it. So you really have got to know where to spend money, where not to, and what your limitations are as far as what different kinds of fishing you can get in, what kind of fisheries to concentrate on, so you're not spread too thin, and you're able to kind of transition from one thing into another and keep a productive year going year round. Because, the goal is never to sit still and go backwards. You want to kind of keep a little something coming in all the time, whether it's big money or not, just so, you have something to pay the bills. And I think that's where, that business standpoint kind of makes sense. You got to know if, you can't necessarily do everything, because you might not make enough money to offset your costs, and you might not have enough time to focus on it. So you really got to, think about what you want to be in and what not to, because you don't want to get spread too thin. Like last year when we had the drop net boat and the pound net boat, there were times where, we kind of felt spread a little thin, and when you're able to kind of better focus on the things that you do best, I feel like you're more likely to succeed.
And after you graduated from college, did you moved right back home?
No, I graduated in December, and I got a job waiting tables in Wilmington, because my lease went through May. I wasn't sure at the time that I wanted to move back home. Waited tables for a month, and then I took a trip with my dad for a month, went to Costa Rica as my graduation present.
Okay.
Came home, back to Wilmington after that in March, and waited tables for 2 more months. Decided that I didn't like waiting tables in Wilmington, that I wasn't making enough money for the time I was spending, so I packed up and moved home. Figured if I was going to wait tables, I might as well wait tables in Hatteras and make more money and be at home.
So that was sometime in the spring of
2009.
Okay.
And moved home and started waiting tables for Donna and Rick at the captain's table.
Okay.
Had been doing that during the summers all through college, and they gave me a full-time job. Did that for a year, and I enjoyed it, and took the winter off, and it was the first time I'd ever really taken time off since I graduated. So that was nice. Took a little bit of time off. Got back into it in March, waiting tables. And Dad was fishing at the time, and he had his helper. This would be in 2010. They were, coppering, getting everything set up for the summer, and his helper he flaked on him, and didn't show up, was not showing up, and Dad, being 50, I guess he was probably 55 at the time, fishing 2-pound nets by himself. I just kind of started going with him to help him, and I just hadn't stopped since then. And for the remainder of that year, I worked at my job waiting tables. I fished, pound netting, and I worked at the Gingerbread House Bakery, which I have since I was 13. So I was doing all three of those, and did that until August, when you start getting really busy with the fall pound netting, and had to quit the captain's table because I didn't have enough time, and really started focusing on fishing. I guess that's when I started fishing full time, was that point.
And you do summer pound netting and fall flounder too? And
then we crab in the fall and crab in the early spring from February until we set the pound nets.
Okay.
So really our only downtime is December and January as far as not really working. And we would have dogged this year. I mean, we were rigging the small boat up to go dogging, but it's like Rob said, with 10 cents and 50 box quota, it's just not really worth it. It's worth it for one guy.
So how many boats do you and your dad have?
Right now, just the one. It's a 25-foot Southwester, and if you're not familiar with the Southwester, it's a Parker is now what used to be Southwester. So for people who don't really know what a Southwester is, it's like a Parker.
And the name of it?
John 3:16.
Okay. And you use that for pound netting and for crabbing. And let's go for pound netting in the summertime. Basically, what type of species do you catch?
Our primary focus is we try to catch Spanish mackerel from May until August, and then in August, if we are blessed enough to not have a storm, we try to transition into catching ribbon fish for that period. Okay. And then about mid-September, we transition to the large mesh nets and start catching flounders.
Okay.
And in the summertime, do you want me to tell you everything that we catch in the summer?
Sure.
All right, Spanish mackerel is the primary species that we try to target, but we also target ribbon fish. We are now able to target threadfin herring and sell all of them, and also known as a hairy back. We sell horseshoe crabs. We have a 50 crab limit per day. It was just dropped from 150 to 50, which is terrible, but they gave our quota to Maryland.
Okay.
But horseshoe.
Do people eat horseshoe crabs, or is that medical?
They use them for medical research, and they also use them for conch traps and eel traps as bait. And we catch spadefish.
Oh yeah, one of my favorites.
Gray trout, sheep's head, star butterfish, straight butterfish, and an assortment of other stuff, bluefish.
Have you ever eaten a ribbon fish? Are they good?
I have not, but I hear they're delicious.
Okay, I've never
Tillman
had
says
one.
they're great.
And how about a hairy back?
No, I
don't know
one.
that I want to eat something
I
called a hairy
have no
back.
desire to eat one, but the Asian people really enjoy them apparently. So
Okay.
And we're very happy to be able to sell them because they've been nothing but a burden and a nuisance my dad's whole fishing career, and it's just been in the last 2 years that we've been able to really start selling them. And they've got to be in real good shape. And the problem with those are if you catch them too small, they'll peg your net and hang themselves. And then you've got a real problem because your net just gets so heavy, and it just is a real burden. And they have real sharp bones. They'll cut your hands and your arms all to pieces. Just really a burden. But if you catch the bigger ones, they don't hang, and you can just bail them right in the boat.
Okay.
And it's always been that you've had to, they mix in with the other fish, and it's all live, zero bycatch fishery. So you have to cull through everything as we bail it out of the net. So it's always been years past before the last couple that we had to spend hours and hours going through the fish to get the good stuff out. And now the hairybacks are good fish now, so we spend a lot less time culling fish now. And it's great.
And you all sell to Tillman?
Sell to Tillman.
Okay.
Sold to Tillman since 1993. Dad has. Very loyal to Tillman.
Uh-huh. Do you remember, the first time you were ever paid for fishing?
Yeah. I don't remember the first time, so to speak, but Dad paid me my whole life growing up. I started fishing with him when I was about 6 or 7. I would just go out there and tug on the middle of the net and think I was working and play with the fish and
right.
stuff. But he'd give me $5 every time I go.
Uh-huh.
So from a very young age, I was taught the value of $1 and the benefit of work and reward. So it really instilled in me a work ethic from a really young age, and it's kind of it's paid off even today because it's just made me driven for knowing that I've got to work for anything that I want because not from a well-endowed family. So
you don't have the trust fund.
No trust fund. So we have to work for what we'd like to have in this world. So
and how does your father pay you now? Do you work for a share?
I work for a percentage.
Okay.
Not really gonna tell you what I made.
No,
but
that's
yeah.
okay.
But it's a percentage of what we catch. We take the expenses off the top as far as fuel goes. Dad pays for the copper, the net expense, all that stuff. That's paid out of his share.
The gear.
The gear. Because, obviously his share is much larger than mine, but he pays for all the gear, all the large expenses, the stakes, the rope, the buoys, the copper, the net, the gaff handles. We break a couple gaffs every year. All that stuff he pays for. The only thing I bring the drinks and the naps.
Okay. Well,
but the fuel. When we get paid, we pay our Odin's dock bill out of it, and then we split it up after that. And if we're crabbing, we'll take out if we're buying fresh bait from Rob or from Roger or whoever. We take the money out off the top for that, and when we buy frozen bait from the fish houses, they automatically deduct that from our check.
Okay.
And oftentimes it's a problem finding any kind of bait around here, and fatback's the best stuff, and we can buy frozen fatback from Launchies, and Tillman buys that and then charges us for it and then takes that directly out of our fish check.
So essentially it's what comes off the top would be
direct expenses.
Yeah,
your
operating
costs.
The cost that you have for going out that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Okay. That's it. So it's a real fair thing. Do you want me to tell you about what we catch in the fall?
Yes.
Okay.
With the flounder?
The fall, we target primarily flounder. That's the bread and butter. But we also catch large quantities of large sheep's head, black drum. Certain times of the year early on, we catch a lot of star butterfish. What else? Big bluefish. And I'd say that's pretty well, the bulk of it there.
Okay.
And if we kept small mesh out, which this past year we were fortunate enough to do because we didn't get a storm until Sandy, you can catch ribbon fish all the way up until October. And this past year was really the first year that we have been able to keep small mesh out late.
Okay.
And we kept small mesh out all the way up until the third week in September, which, you know, the first couple years I worked with Dad, we got storms. We had Earl and Irene. So, you know, we had to take all our summer gear up, batten down the hatches, and then you get in go mode directly after that because you got to reconfigure your stands.
Because we had Earl and Irene back to back almost around the
same exact time. Yeah. And then this year we thought we got away, and then we got Sandy.
Yeah. So how did the flounder season end up this year?
This year it was, if we hadn't had Sandy, it would have been one of the best years on record.
Really?
Yep. But Sandy really, you know, it ruined November.
Yeah.
Totally.
It ruined.
You know, it was good. You know, it was good October. It was really, in all honesty, it was the same story as the last 3 years as far as October goes, being that we've had really good Octobers the last 3 years, and then November bust because we get either, this year it was Sandy, the 2 years prior to that, it was a large, massive cold front that made all the fish leave.
Right.
And then there's nothing left. So you get a real good catch out of it, but then there's nothing left to be had after that. So, but the good thing about this year is that we did have a September. And generally you don't have a September fall pound netting because we spend the bulk of, August and September setting up.
Right.
And we're not fishing as much as we'd like to be because we are setting up everything, and it's such a drawn-out process, being that it's just my dad and I. And so it takes us a while to get all 7 or 8 nets out, depending on how many we do.
And then it would always seem like, okay, the nets would be ready to set, but there was storms coming, you know.
And you don't want to pull the trigger too early because you might get ruined. And so there's a fine line, and our general rule is having 5 nets set by September 15th. That's what Dad always tries to abide by. 5 fall nets fishing by the 15th. And we're pretty good at adhering to that every year.
Does your dad talk much about changes that he's seen in fishing over his lifetime?
Well, yeah, of course.
Let me backtrack. I mean, your dad didn't come from a commercial fishing family.
But he's fished for almost 40 years now.
And did he start fishing when he moved here to Hatteras? Okay.
He had done construction in the past, and he grew up as a young kid in Michigan, and then lived in Baltimore, Maryland. And he went to school at William and Mary on a lacrosse scholarship and dropped out. And then he went to UNCW, and I believe knew Rob from down there, dropped out. And never finished and got his degree. Always had a hard time sitting still. And then he moved here and was banging nails. And he went fishing with his friend Brian Jones. And they were, at that time, there was large amounts of large croakers in the Sound. And they went and had 60 boxes of croakers in a net. And my dad figured if that guy could do it, anybody could do it. So he was hooked, and he's been doing it ever since. And I believe he was about 20 years old when that, and he's 58 now.
Okay. But he talks a lot about changes.
Well, the main change that we like to discuss is, just the target species in the summer and the lack of croakers and trout that, because he used to make his living catching trout and catching big croakers. Right. And, as a kid, I grew up fishing in the middle of the Sound with him. We used to set pound nets, or he used to set pound nets. I rode along it. It was in the middle of the Sound out on the 20-foot edge. And, they're targeting gray trout. And the trout seemed to leave for a while. And we started catching a lot of small croakers, 100 boxes a day of little pinhead croakers, and you couldn't sell them. And it just got to be so much work with so little reward that they got out of it. And then the regulation of the trout kind of compiled the whole thing, because not only were there not as many trout as there had been, you couldn't catch as many. And in turn, he chose to start focusing his efforts elsewhere, and he started setting his summer nets where the fall stands were on the back of the reef, and that's where we fish now during the summer.
So, is it trout? Is it 100 pounds you can bring in?
You're allowed up to 100 pounds, but you have to have
other
you're allowed 10% of your total catch at this point. So if you bring in 100 pounds of trout, you have to have 900 pounds of other fish. No matter what they are. Okay. You can have 900, and also horseshoe crabs are considered bycatch as well, or
they
part
count.
of total catch. So we were weighing our horseshoe crabs all year as well to count towards our total catch allotment, because we caught a lot of trout this summer. And we're in a spot where you don't catch trout. There's a lot of trout in the sound now, and we're in a spot that you can't catch a lot of trout, and we had several days this year where we bailed beautiful gray trout overboard alive because we did not have enough of a total catch to sustain bringing in what we had bailed overboard. We'd have 600 pounds of total fish, so we could only bring in 60 pounds of trout, and we'd have 200 pounds of them in the net. So you end up picking, you dip them out, and you pick out the big mediums, throw them in the boat, and bail the pan trout overboard.
Do horseshoe crabs weigh a lot?
Yes.
Yeah. They do?
Well, we catch males and
I don't
females.
know.
The males are the smaller ones, and the females are the large ones. I mean, a big one can weigh 5, 6, 7 pounds.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, the ones we catch are huge, some of them. We were talking about changes in what Dad had seen. I mean, he not only the trout does he talk about, like, being changing, but he also talks about, it used to be that, the whole island, all the fishermen were pound netters, and nobody pound nets anymore except for my dad and Tillman and, Michael Peel and the handful of guys that are on the inside of the reef, Todd Balance, Pat Krawchuk.
Right.
So that's another thing that we discuss a lot, is just the amount of people that aren't in it anymore because of people just get out of it. It's because it's hard on your body and the instability with it, because you have to incur X amount of costs every year, and you never really know if you're going to catch any fish.
Exactly.
And you're flirting with the devil every year with the storms. So between those two things, people just tend to get out of it.
Yeah, it's always made me nervous when Rob was pound netting.
Yeah, I'm a nervous wreck. And
listening to the weather
for
a cast, going, ew. And then, later in the fall, okay, so, when are we going to get that nice blow where we're going to catch fish, but we don't want it to blow enough to tear up the nets, that kind of thing.
But, I mean, the good thing about pound netting is it doesn't change as far as what you're doing. It's the same as it's been always. You just put your nets out and you hope for the best.
Yep.
And that's there's something to be said for that. And we enjoy that part about it because you kind of know what you're going to get every day as far as the process and everything. And I'm not much on the riding around looking for a mark thing. I would get real impatient.
Well, what do you think is appealing about fishing? What do you like about it? I mean, there's a lot.
I love to kill shit. I mean, I know that's terrible. I mean, really, I love that. I enjoy it, and I enjoy being with my dad. I enjoy that. I take pride in that. My granddad worked on the boat. My dad, it's my dad's boat, and I work on the boat, and our nephew goes with us, or my dad's grandson. Okay. So that, I really enjoy that about it. I enjoy being outdoors. I do enjoy hunting and fishing as general hobbies, so being able to fish for a living and, take things from the sea, I really enjoy that. I don't enjoy the yard work.
Yes.
That drives me crazy.
And there's plenty of that.
And there's more of that than fishing. And that's the only problem. But yeah, I mean, I really the best thing about it though is being outside working for my dad and spending time with him, and then being able to harvest fish for a living is something to be said for that.
And it's
because hunting and fishing is what I love to do. I love hunting more than anything, and then like fishing's right there. If I could duck hunt for a living somehow, that would really be ideal. But
what do you think about how the public perceives commercial fishing and fishermen? Do they recognize? Do you think that it's a valuable livelihood that provides a service?
Well, it depends on if you're talking to a Democrat or a Republican, really.
Okay.
Depends on where your values lie. I think right now, I believe that social media is really going crazy and is very euphoric over the country fishing, hunting lifestyle of being outdoors. It is trendy now. It's cool to be a fisherman. It's cool to be a hunter. So right now, I think if anything, maybe the public perceives fishing in maybe a little bit more positive light than they have in years past because of the TV shows and stuff that are kind of geared towards maybe giving fishing, exposing the public a little bit to it. But at the same time, I believe that it really boils down to who you're speaking with, because everybody has preconceived notions, and everybody has values, whether it be they think that nature is most important, or they believe that man interacting with nature and and kind of in a mutually beneficial relationship, that that might be the best way. So it really depends on who you're talking to, really.
Do you think that people make the connection between, that's how the fish or the crabs get to my dinner plate?
Maybe so. I think another reason that maybe we're perceived in a little bit more positive light now is the also trendy, in thing to eat organically and eat naturally, natural foods. So fish has become more valuable as a result. So people are kind of giving a little bit more value to the fishermen because they want the fish and they are into the natural lifestyle and what we produce. But at the same time, our government's controlled by a bunch of tree-hugging Democrats at this point, and they want to see us out of business because they believe we're destroying the environment. So, and I'm a registered Democrat, but I do not hug trees. So,
okay.
Obama is very much, his administration is controlled by environmentalists and their interests. That's perfectly obvious with the road.
Yeah.
So as long as the government has, these leftist agendas that are controlled by wanting nature to basically be left alone and us kind of operate, separate from it, then, we're kind of going to be perceived in a negative light through those people's eyes.
For nature to be, for humans not to interact at all with nature, which is
rather
than
interacting harmoniously, they kind of believe that they're supposed to do their thing and we do our thing separately, and that we're not supposed to interact.
Just for the fact that we are here, there's interaction.
But God put those things on the earth for us to eat, so that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you can see with
Government
some of the appointments that this administration has made to the fisheries department has been a little not in tune with human uses of resources. I'll put it that way.
Exactly.
So,
and I believe, and I'm all for conservation and everything like that, but I believe that a lot of times when fish populations leave, I believe large portions of fish populations cycle, global waters, and I believe that, my brother, for instance, knows a fella who they just started dragging for flounders in Panama, and the guy daggone filled up his nets before he ever got out of the harbor. because they figured out exactly what they were doing wrong, because for the longest time they hadn't been able to catch fish down there because didn't have their doors adjusted properly, and a guy from up here went down there and adjusted their doors, and the guy had like 500 boxes his first drag. Wow. You know, so I believe that fish populations cycle, and I believe that, you know, if people think that fish populations are dwindling, I don't think that it's as a direct result from us. I believe that it's not necessarily fully in our control, and that things will come back. You know, because everything's an up and down cycle, whether you're looking at economics or you're looking at populations or whatever, everything goes up and down. So.
Do you subscribe to theories about climate change impacting migration patterns?
Certainly.
Okay.
I think that the water is getting warmer. I think that, you know, you mentioned change earlier. One of the things Dad likes to mention, I didn't mention this earlier, is the lack of rockfish around now. I'm sure Rob likes to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Dad and I both have rock permits. I have a ocean gill netting permit. He has a beach hauling permit, so we can target them either way that they come about. Right. But they don't ever get down this far anymore because the water's too warm in the wintertime now. And that's the thing that changes, and that, you know, fishing has kind of changed a little bit. Croakers a lot of times don't get as far south as they used to be. Dad, Rob, they always talk about catching the croakers up in the hook right next to the beach, 40, 50 foot of water, and you can see the sand boiling. And now they're catching them in warm water out in the Gulf Stream. Right. And then as the fish populations tend to shift in, they tend to catch them more north of the point, and it used to always be it was down south of the point. So just things like that. And, you know, the fishing that we catch, you know, I'm sure, you know, the Spanish mackerel fishing, you know, I know that they've always kind of caught them, but, you know, I think everything's kind of in relation to climate change and everything like that. I mean, I just think it's all kind of related. I don't know if it helps. It probably helps other fisheries where it negatively affects other fisheries, but I mean, I'm not a scientist.
No,
But the rock fishing is a really good example of it.
That is a very
good example.
I'd kill for a rock to eat right now. Earlier you mentioned, in conjunction with business and your studies, that certainly being a smart businessman is important to making a successful fisherman. Are there any other character traits?
Stubborn.
Okay.
Discipline, especially in what we do. You never know what one year's going to hold to the next, so you got to be able to save your money. Uh-huh. You got to be able to save your money for taxes. You know, 30% tax rate, you know, it's tough. So, yeah, stubborn, discipline. What else? I'd say those are the two daggone the most, really, and driven. I mean, you got to be driven. You got to be, you know, able to kind of do things. Self-motivate and get things done on your own, and know that, you know, you've got X date. That's, you know, things are probably going to happen, and you got to have your ducks in a row prior to that happening, or you're going to be out to lunch. Because my dad likes to talk about every year. It's just various guys not getting their gear out in time when we're setting our fall pounds. And we always tend to get a little shift in the end of September, and most of the time we're the only guys with our gear to the water, and Tillman's still kind of shuffling his feet. Right. You know, and he's able to do that because he's got so much help, and they work at a much faster pace than we do. Right. But, you know, there's just a lot of times where we'll have our fall net set ready to catch flounders, and we'll catch a few flounders before most of the other guys get their gear out, right? Because, you know, you're kind of working towards that date, and we know that we've got to have 5 nets in the water by the 15th. You have your schedule and your plan, like an organization for... And you can't plan. You can't plan. You just got to plan and hope for the best. That's very true. And that's the other thing, is you can't get too bogged down in your plan. You got to be flexible. Flexible is a trait that fishermen have to be. And you can forget about planning. That's my girlfriend. You know.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we don't plan anything.
She wants to plan everything. I can't plan dinner.
Our plans are usually, that sounds good if I'm not fishing.
Yeah.
You know, are there any other guys your age who fish around here?
I mean, the guys that we mentioned, my Tillman Gray, which, you know, he's a few years older than me, Till Jr., rather, Jacob Hicks, he's 3 or 4 years older than me. Jeremy O'Neill, is 3 or 4 years older than me. Bennett Langowski, he was one of my best friends growing up. He works for Jeff Oden. We're right about the same age. He's, 8, 9 months older than I am. Brooke Stowe, another one of my best friends from growing up, Spurgeon Stowe's son. He's a longliner as well, like Bennett, and he's fishing on a boat in Launchies right now. Patrick Caton. That'd be somebody you might want to talk to for this, because he kind of does, you know, he does more of the charter fishing, but he's a commercial fisherman as well. He's one of the best king mackerel fishermen on the East Coast, and he's just a few years older than I am. But there's a lot of guys. Brant Miller, you know, Wayne Miller's son.
He fishes?
Yes, ma'am. Corey Sisler.
Oh, yeah.
Jai Williams, Jarvis's son. He's on a long line and boat right now out of Launchies. And they've been in the Bahamas catching swordfish. Who else?
That is a lot. A lot more than
There's a lot more than you thought.
Yeah.
Andy Trant, you know, he just signed on with Ron Whitaker, so he's kind of more signed up for the sport fishing, but he's commercial fished his whole life, so he can't not be considered either. And there's more guys down there. I mean, like Tyler Hooper works for Little Tillman, and you know, he's just started the last couple of years, but he's a young guy. There's a young kid named Hunter that works for John Cannon, Jersey, that has the Miss Kaylee. He's from Virginia Beach. Who else? I mean, there's Nate. That you mentioned. There's a right fair jag of us actually, more than you kind of think, and a lot of the guys are just, you know, there's only a handful of guys that are running their own rigs, you know, myself not included. You know, there's just, you know, Tillman, Jeremy, Jake, Nate, and Patrick. But more of us are kind of helping guys out. But yeah, there's a right fair share of us.
That is more.
And there's also a lot of guys that do the sport fishing stuff too.
Yeah, there are a lot of them, and most of them I don't know. I guess just because my ties have always been more to the commercial. So let's see, what do you see as the critical needs for the future of commercial fishing on Hatteras Island or in Dare County? I mean, what would be a huge help? And I don't know really where I'm going with that question. I mean, certainly regulatory.
I was about to say abolition, you know, just the complete, you know, doing away with national marine fisheries as well as state DMF. I mean, that would really be the best thing. And I know that'll never happen, but that would be the best thing. And really just to really lift some of the regulations from it, you know, because, you know, there's catch quotas and stuff like that, but just, you know, the amount of paperwork that you have to go through, and, you know, just the spacing regulations, required emergency gear, and just the cost that you've got to incur to kind of get into certain fisheries, permits, stuff like that, you know, just really large costs that are brought about because of government regulations that wouldn't otherwise be there. You know, just like a life raft, your survival suits and everything like that, which, you know, you should probably have, but I mean, you have to get your life raft repacked every 2 years or so, and it's $1,000. You know, just for something like that. $1,000 a lot of money just for something silly like that.
And you mentioned the cost of permits, and
I
mean, some permits are increasing drastically in price, and I've couple of years I thought, well,
$80,000-$100,000.
If I were a young person, if I didn't inherit a permit. I think, you know, you have the cost of if you're buying a boat, if you're buying gear, emergency equipment, but then you add on the cost of a permit on top of that. And I'm not sure that would be a really wise investment.
Yeah, you better know what you're doing before you get into the fishery.
I mean, you're going to have to.
I mean, we mentioned you know, Miss Kaylee there earlier. I mean, she just got one of those tuna permits for the long line in there a year ago, and supposedly they're going to shut the fishery down in 2 years. He paid $80,000 or $90,000 for it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you want to put that in.
No, I won't, but that's incredible.
Know, so, you know, and he spent, you know, I think it was upwards of, you know, $60,000 or $70,000 outfitting his boat on top of that for that stuff. So, you know.
So that would be.
But deregulation would be a big help.
It's the.
And I tell you, if the government would do
the,
something to give people incentive here to eat local seafood and, you know, nationally caught stuff and quit importing stuff from Taiwan and Vietnam and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And going back a minute, it would be not just the, I guess, the regulations themselves, but also that uncertainty that is a disincentive to invest.
Exactly,
you know,
and it's a disincentive for young people like myself to even get in the business because you don't know if you're going to be able to do what you're doing 10 years from now, and you know you're at a point when you're 26 that you want to kind of be doing what you might think about doing for the rest of your life. So you really want to make sure you're using constructive use of your time. And so, you know, for me, I'm always considering getting out of it because of the uncertainty that does go along with it. Because I do have a business background from school, and that, you know, maybe I should be doing something else so that I know that I can do it 20 years from now. And with fishing, there's not really a whole lot of certainty in it. But people will probably always be pounding it. That's the one good thing about it. They don't put a lot of pressure on us just yet.
So do you see yourself in the future fishing?
See, I don't know.
I
don't know, Susan. I mean, every year is kind of, you know, I just take one day at a time, and I always tell myself that I'm going to get out of it, and then I find myself in the backyard mending a net. You know? And not because my dad's putting pressure on me to do it either, just because I end up going over there and doing it. So. But
it would, I mean, you would probably like it if, you know, in the future you could incorporate fishing into
I'd love to. I mean,
the ways that you make an income.
Well, that's part of the problem is as I go in and looking for these jobs, I realize what a lifestyle transition I'm going to have to make, and it becomes difficult.
Very difficult. It is.
So, and part of the reason I love pound netting so much is that you do get a lot of time. And I can go duck hunting, and I can do the things that I'd like to do rather than only having a day off. And when the time comes, we'll work a month straight without, during, September and August without really having a day. But then this time of the year, I'm not really that busy. We're in the yard busy, but you can take time to do other things.
It is a nice lifestyle in that respect. Particularly, if you enjoy things that don't cost an arm and a leg to do, a lot of people probably wouldn't be very happy with not making a whole lot of money all the time. But money isn't everything. I mean, there's other things that...
There's something to be said for just living on Hatteras, too, and you can only do so many things and live down here. So that's part of the challenge.
Well, thanks.
Is that it?
That's great. Yeah. That's fantastic. You gave me a whole bunch of stuff there.
You should talk to Patrick Caton, though.
He would be a
He's
good
kind
one.
of...